You know Sleeping Beauty, don't you? The graceful Princess Aurora, spinning wheels hidden away, Maleficent's dramatic curse, true love's kiss breaking the spell. It's a tale of romance, magic, and happily ever after. It's also a complete sanitization of one of folklore's most disturbing narratives. Welcome to another descent into the twisted origins of our beloved fairy tales. Today we're peeling back the rose-colored glass to reveal what lies beneath Disney's sparkling tale. Fair warning, the original Sleeping Beauty makes Game of Thrones look like a children's tea party. If you're brave enough to venture into these literary shadows with me, help me unlock this cursed manuscript by hitting that like button. Let's start with what you think you know. Disney's 1959 masterpiece gave us Princess Aurora named for the dawn, which is charmingly symbolic until you realize what dawn actually represents in the original tales. 3 fairies bless the newborn princess at her christening. But the uninvited Maleficent crashes the party with a particularly creative form of revenge. A curse involving spindles and eternal sleep. The good fairy softens this to a century-long nap curable by true love's kiss. Aurora grows up hidden in the woods, falls in love with a handsome stranger who turns out to be a prince. Pricks her finger anyway, falls asleep, gets rescued by said prince after he battles a dragon, and everyone lives happily ever after. Charming, romantic, completely fictional. The Grimm brothers' version, Little Briar Rose, published in 1812, already shows us the cracks in the fairy tale facade. Instead of 3 fairies, we have 13 wise women. Think ancient consultants with questionable life advice. The king, demonstrating medieval hospitality at its finest, only invites 12 because he's short on golden plates. Apparently, proper dinnerware was more important than avoiding supernatural vengeance. The 13th wise woman arrives fashionably late and significantly more homicidal. Her curse? Death by spindle at age 15. Another wise woman manages to negotiate this down to 100-year sleptha, medieval equivalent of plea bargaining with forces beyond mortal comprehension. But here's where the Grimm version gets delightfully dark. Those thorny barriers around the castle aren't just decorative, they're carnivorous. Countless princes attempt to reach the sleeping princess, only to become permanent garden decorations, their bones entangled in the murderous vegetation. The story specifically mentions their dreadful grasp, and how they claim their lives. 1 century later, when the curse finally expires, the thorns transform into beautiful flowers for the destined prince. Talk about timing. The roses literally bloom from the decomposed remains of failed suitors. If that's not a metaphor for something deeply unsettling about courtship expectations, I don't know what is. French author Charles Perrault's 1697 version. The Sleeping Beauty in the Wood starts similarly, but takes a sharp left turn into absolutely unhinged territory. The prince doesn't wake the princess with non-consensual kissing. He actually respects boundaries and simply kneels beside her. She wakes naturally after 100 years. They chat for hours, fall in love properly, marry, and have 2 children named Dawn and Day. Sweet, right? Wrong. This is where Perrault reveals his true creative genius. The prince's mother is an ogress with very specific dietary preferences. She wants to eat her grandchildren and daughter-in-law, not metaphorically, literally. She orders the palace cook to prepare the children with sauce Robert and serves what she believes are her grandchildren to her son for dinner. The cook, demonstrating more moral fiber than most characters in this tale, secretly substitutes lamb and hides the real children. When the ogress discovers this deception, she prepares a courtyard filled with vipers and various venomous creatures, planning to throw the entire family into what can only be described as a medieval torture soup. The prince arrives just in time, the ogress throws herself into her own death cauldron, and everyone lives happily ever after. The moral, according to Perrault: that young lady shouldn't rush into marriage. Because clearly the real lesson here is about taking your time with relationships, not avoiding cannibalistic in-laws. But if you want to see just how deep this rabbit hole of terrible decisions goes, we need to discuss Giambattista Basile's 1636 tale Sun, Moon, and Talia. This version makes everything else look like a Disney Junior production. Princess Talia pricks her finger on a flax splinter and falls into what appears to be death. Her father, grief-stricken, places her on a throne and abandons the entire palace. Reasonable response to tragedy, clearly. Later, a king goes hunting, finds the abandoned palace. discovers the beautiful sleeping princess. And here's where things get absolutely horrific, that her unconscious state presents an opportunity. He assaults her, leaves, and returns to his own kingdom, where he promptly forgets about the entire incident. 9 months later, Talia gives birth to twins while still unconscious. A fairy tends to the children, and one baby eventually sucks the flax splinter from her finger, waking her. Talia finds herself with 2 children and no memory of how they arrived. When the king eventually remembers and returns, he explains what happened. Talia's response? She's delighted to see him. Stockholm Syndrome doesn't begin to cover this psychological complexity, but wait, there's more. The king's wife discovers the affair and orders her cook to kill the children and serve them to her husband as dinner. She also plans to burn Talia alive. The cook saves the children by substituting lamb. The king arrives just as his wife is about to commit the ultimate barbecue atrocity, and the queen gets thrown into her own fire instead. The moral of this story, according to Basile, those whom fortune favors find good luck even in their sleep. That's the official takeaway from a tale involving assault, unconscious pregnancy, attempted infanticide, and cannibalism. These aren't just twisted fairy tales, they're windows into medieval society's deepest anxieties and beliefs. The obsession with female purity, the powerlessness of women, the acceptance of violence as conflict resolution, and the belief that fate supersedes personal agency all reflect the harsh realities of medieval life. The incorrupt body motif, beautiful women who don't decay after death, was a real medieval fascination. Saints like Catherine of Bologna were displayed in churches for centuries, their preserved remains considered miraculous. The historical Catherine of Valois, wife of England's Henry V, was literally on display at Westminster Abbey. For over 300 years after her death in 1437, visitors regularly kissed her corpse, inspired by Shakespeare's romantic portrayal of her character. By the 18th century, so many tourists had taken souvenirs that when Catherine was finally properly reburied in 1878, her skull, most of her ribs, vertebrae, and all of her teeth were missing. The Sleeping Beauty narrative perfectly captures this medieval obsession with preserved feminine beauty and the male gaze's objectification of women's bodies. Even in death, what's fascinating is watching how each retelling tried to sanitize the previous version while accidentally creating new horrors. The Grimm brothers removed the assault, but added mass murder via homicidal vegetation. Perrault eliminated the non-consensual elements but introduced cannibalistic in-laws. Disney removed all the death and violence, but created a story where a prince kisses an unconscious stranger and calls it romance. Each generation thought they were making the story more appropriate, while missing the fundamental problems entirely. Today's Disney version still carries traces of these medieval anxieties. The emphasis on Aurora's beauty over her personality, her complete passivity in her own story, the resolution through male intervention, the romanticization of unconscious consent, all echo the original tale's problematic themes. We've simply wrapped the same medieval gender dynamics in prettier animation and better musical numbers. The rose imagery that gives the story its romantic symbolism, those roses bloom from the corpses of failed suitors. The spinning wheel curse, it represents the medieval fear of women's domestic power and economic independence. The long sleep, it's about the preservation of female purity through a complete removal of female agency. Even Disney's improvements accidentally reinforce the story's most troubling elements. The real horror of Sleeping Beauty isn't the curses, the cannibalism, the assault hits. How these stories normalize the complete powerlessness of women for centuries. The sleeping woman became the perfect woman. Beautiful, silent, passive, and available for male salvation fantasies. These tales taught generations that the ideal woman contributes nothing to her own story except her appearance. That unconscious consent is romantic, that women's primary value lies in their potential for male possession, and that female agency is something to be cursed away. The fact that we're still telling versions of this story to children, just with better animation and catchier songs, suggests we haven't progressed as far as we'd like to believe. So there you have it, the true genealogy of Sleeping Beauty, from medieval nightmares to Disney dreams. Each generation thought they were improving the story, but perhaps the real question is whether some stories should be allowed to sleep forever. What disturbed you most about these original versions? Did learning about the medieval context change how you view the Disney adaptation? And more importantly, what other childhood fairy tales should we examine next? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's discuss which stories deserve to wake up from their sanitized slumber, and which ones might be better left in their cursed sleep. Don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into the twisted archives of folklore. After all, every fairy tale has thorns beneath its roses, and we're here to help you see them clearly. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.